What's up, guys? In Spain, a little girl named Julia looks out the window as massive chaos unfolds outside. On TV, the president speaks to the nation about World War III and how natural resources have been rationed and placed under strict control. New viruses caused hospitals to collapse, leading to a declaration of a state of emergency. Soon, Julia and her twin sister, Sarah, are called by their father, Ramon. He tells his daughters he loves them and injects something into the back of their necks. He then gives them necklaces before they pack their belongings to leave. Shortly after, the girl's mother, Emilia, runs home and hugs her daughters. Unfortunately, several military officers barge in and drag Ramon away violently, while Emilia is left screaming and crying. 25 years later, an adult Julia is in a dystopian Madrid controlled by the military. She now works as a delivery driver and soon arrives at a brothel to drop off a package of alcohol. While trying to leave, she hears someone crying in a room. So she goes there and finds a young woman named Saul crying. Julia feels sorry for her and tries to take her away, but a man suddenly enters and tries to stop them. He almost kills Julia, strangling her. So in self-defense, she pulls a knife from her pocket and brutally stabs him. Moments later, the man succumbs to his injuries while the two women flee. But Julia suddenly remembers she left her necklace inside, so she asks Saul to stay put and goes back. She recovers the necklace and returns to get Saul, only to realize the girl is gone. Horrified, Julia rushes back home without anyone noticing and cleans off the blood. Shortly after, her boyfriend Carlos finds her in a tense state and asks what happened. Julia tearfully confesses that she killed a man. However, he wasn't just an ordinary man, but a high-ranking military officer named Major Merida. In a small town, Hugo and his daughter Marta, who is also Sarah's daughter, place a flower on her grave. She recently passed away due to a deadly virus. After that, they meet Hugo's brother Alex. The three then head to Madrid, where they plan to find Marta's aunt Julia and grandmother Emilia. Upon arriving at the checkpoint, the soldiers ask about her mother. So Marta lies and says she will join them soon. Meanwhile, at the brothel, a police officer named Mayor Jimenez arrives to investigate the murder with his team. He interrogates all the workers and discovers the dead officer was with a young woman whom they believe to be the killer. The officer then takes the workers to the station and brutally beats and tortures them to extract information about that girl. At the same time, Carlos warns Julia that she must leave the city, as the police will eventually find her. Julia worries about her mother, but Carlos reminds her that staying would put her mother in danger. The couple decides to leave the city the next day, so Julia goes to see her mother one last time. Meanwhile, Hugo, Marta, and Alex finally arrive at Emilia's house, and the family is very happy to reunite after a long time. Julia also appears shortly after, and Marta comments that she looks exactly like her mother. Then the family decides that no one must know about Sarah's death from the virus, because that would mean the government would arrest them and possibly kill them for being infected. The next day, Hugo, Alex, and Marta attend a routine blood test required for all newcomers to the city. During this, the nurses find something unexpected in Marta's blood and quickly alert their superiors. So, some officers forcibly take Marta, which sends her father and uncle into a panic. The girl starts screaming for help, while Hugo and Alex desperately run after her to get her back. Unfortunately, Marta is taken away in a vehicle while Hugo is beaten by the military. Shortly after, he arrives at Emilia's house where he explains what happened. At that moment, the block chief, Bagana, introduces herself and suggests the government might have taken Marta because Hugo is unemployed. The woman assures them Marta will be sent to a colony where she will be well taken care of, but Hugo refuses to believe this and is desperate. So, Emilia says she knows someone who can help them. Later, Emilia arrives at a secret location where she gets into a car and meets the Minister of Health, Luis. They appear to be old friends. So, Emilia explains the situation and asks for his help. Luis says his wife is looking for some staff and suggests he can give Hugo a job, which might help. He provides his home address and also gives Hugo a pass to get through. It turns out that in this reality, the rich live in an area called Sector 1, while the poor live in Sector 2, which is divided by a fence. A pass is required for poor people to cross the fence. Emilia thanks him for the help while Luis looks at her fondly. The next morning, Hugo arrives at the checkpoint, uses his pass, and finally enters Sector 1. Soon he arrives at the minister's mansion, where he meets the head housekeeper, who instructs him to wash his hands repeatedly. Hugo then meets the minister's wife, Alma, who interviews him and offers a job as a caretaker. Despite his engineering background, Alma also asks him to bring his wife, as it is a position for a couple. He explains his wife is in another city, but when Alma says it is non-negotiable, he promises to bring her the next day. At night, Marta and other children are taken to a mysterious facility called CIM. The children are forced to hand over all their belongings, but Marta secretly keeps a necklace, a gift from her late mother. Shortly after, the facility director arrives and turns out to be Alma. She speaks with a scientist named Dr. Thomas as they are conducting experiments on the children to find a cure for the virus. Thomas claims these experiments are dangerous and the children could die, but she doesn't care, saying the children are their last hope. During the night, some police officers finally locate Saul, who was hiding with her grandmother and little sister. The grandmother tries to protect her, insisting the dead man was a predator who used to take young girls by force, but the officers refuse to listen and execute her immediately before arresting Saul. They take her to the station, where she is subjected to torture, while they demand to know who killed Major Merida. Elsewhere, Carlos and Julia are about to leave the city when they are suddenly approached by Hugo. He explains how Marta was taken and that the only way to get her back is for him to have a job. But for that, the employers are asking for his wife. Since Julia and Sarah are identical, Hugo begs her to pretend to be his wife until he secures the work contract. Julia is stunned by this and refuses, as she intends to leave the city immediately. She apologizes to him and leaves with Carlos on his motorcycle, but on the way, she gets worried about her niece and ends up deciding to help Hugo. Carlos agrees with the idea, and the two plan to meet at 11 that night to escape the city. Next, Julia returns home and tells her mother about her plan to take Sarah's place. Emilia then cuts her braids so she looks exactly like her sister. Meanwhile, at the station, the girl finally reveals the truth about the murder. She describes Julia's face to the officers, who immediately begin distributing wanted posters throughout the city. Shortly after, Begana also receives the wanted poster. She immediately recognizes Julia. She goes to find Emilia and asks about her daughter, but suddenly Julia appears and introduces herself as Sarah. She says she hasn't seen her sister lately, so Begana walks away. Later, Julia reaches the fence where she meets Hugo, and both enter Sector 1. They arrive at Luis's house, where the head housekeeper makes them shower before assigning their responsibilities. That night, a big dinner takes place where Alma's children, Ivan and Daniela, are present along with some other guests. It turns out Jimenez is also among them, which makes Julia nervous. The officer comments that her face looks very familiar, but Luis says she is a friend's daughter and harmless. After the party ends, Hugo and Julia finally receive their work contracts, which fills them with relief. Julia confesses to Hugo that she killed the government official who was molesting a minor. He is shocked and thanks her for risking her life to bring Marta back. Elsewhere, Alma returns to CIM, where she speaks with Dr. Thomas about the progress of their experiments. The children are getting very sick and vomiting because of the experiments. Alma goes to see them, approaching Marta and calling her special. She finds a necklace on the little girl, which angers Alma, as children cannot have personal items. She orders a nurse to throw the necklace away and threatens to fire her if it happens again. Elsewhere, Julia arrives at the spot where she and Carlos were supposed to meet, but he doesn't show up. She starts to panic, while elsewhere, officers have tracked Carlos down and are shooting at him. Shortly after, Jimenez announces to the public that Major Merida's killer was caught and shot dead while trying to flee. Julia is with some homeless people who are also trying to leave the city when suddenly a drone appears before them. Julia asks everyone to take cover as the police arrive and start shooting at everyone. Amid the chaos, Julia runs to hide behind a wall with a father and his son, but their efforts are in vain. They end up getting caught, and when the son tries to run, he is shot dead instantly. His father tries to reach the fallen boy only to be killed as well. Julia is horrified, and just as she is about to be shot, Hugo appears and tells the officers she is his wife, and they both work for the Minister of Health. He claims they are new to the city and she must have gotten lost, insisting she wasn't trying to flee. Hearing this, the officers let them go but warn them to be careful next time. Once alone, Hugo finally tells Julia that Carlos is dead and he is being labeled as the killer on the news. She starts crying while Hugo comforts her. The next morning, both go to work in Sector 1, as they haven't recovered Marta yet. Luis asks Hugo to help fix his car since he is an engineer. Meanwhile, Julia is assigned to take care of Alma's nephew, Sergio, who has formed a good bond with her. At the station, Carlos is still alive, but being brutally tortured by the officers. Jimenez demands to know his girlfriend's whereabouts, but he refuses to reveal anything despite the pain. In the afternoon, Alex arrives at the place where Marta was taken and shows all the paperwork to prove his brother is now employed. He wants Marta back, but the officer tells him to go home and wait for a letter from the government. He meets Daniela, who is also a lawyer, and she feels sorry for him and tries to help, but her efforts are also in vain. Alone, Alex is approached by a nurse who invites him for a chat on a rooftop. They smoke together, and the nurse tells him not to worry, as the little girl is being well taken care of. She gives him her address and invites him to visit later so she can offer help with the situation. At CIM, a boy died after being subjected to extreme experiments, but Alma shows no concern and is happy to hear the scientists are getting closer to a cure. She goes to visit the children, where nurses hand each one a yogurt while Alma tells a story. She praises the children, saying how special and brave they are, and that one day they will save millions of lives. When the story ends, the children lose consciousness due to the spiked yogurt, and the nurses begin taking blood from them. Elsewhere, Julia is in a park with Sergio. When he gives her a necklace, Julia's eyes widen, and she asks where he found it. He says it was in a nearby dumpster in front of the CIM building, which Sergio says is his aunt's facility. Horrified, Julia starts searching through the trash and soon finds Marta's blood-stained clothes as well. She immediately goes home, where she shows the clothes and necklace to Hugo. Both suspect Alma might be behind everything and decide to check the facility. Elsewhere, Alex arrives at the nurse's apartment, where he finds her dressed provocatively. She starts dancing and seducing him, and they end up getting together. However, when it's over, the nurse pulls a gun and points it at Alex. It turns out she is a government informant, but before she can kill him, someone knocks on the door. Amelia found the nurse's address on a paper Alex had left and tries to take him. When the nurse resists, Amelia pulls her gun and shoots her dead. This horrifies Alex, but Amelia instructs him to toss the apartment to make it look like a robbery. She then finds the nurse's diary containing some information and hides it in her clothes. Meanwhile, Hugo manages to fix Luis's car, so he picks up Julia and leaves the house. The two arrive at the CIM building, where they enter unnoticed. While snooping around, they enter a room resembling a morgue and are horrified to see a covered corpse on a table. The two prepare for the worst and pull back the sheet to see whose body it is. To their relief, it isn't Marta, but the boy who died a few days earlier due to the dangerous experiments. They go to check other compartments and discover the bodies of many dead children, so they decide to find Marta and sneak through the facility, avoiding security. Finally, they manage to reach the hall where all the children are sleeping, and through the glass door, Hugo calls for his daughter. Marta hears him and runs to the door, thrilled to see her father. However, they barely have a moment to reunite, as security guards are alerted and start approaching. Hugo is forced to leave, but promises Marta he will return for her. Hugo and Julia escape the building before security forces can catch them. Elsewhere, Amelia and Alex return home, where she tells him the nurse's diary contains a list of people who are in danger. She asks him to go to an address and deliver the diary, but tells him not to mention her name. Alex agrees and goes there, where he meets a young woman named Iris and her father, who turn out to be from a resistance group. Alex tries to warn them and hand over the diary, but they suspect he is a spy and knock him unconscious. Meanwhile, Julia and Hugo return to the minister's house, where they demand to speak with him. Security tries to stop them, but they manage to reach Luis anyway and explain how they saw several children being kept inside the CIM. Alma pretends not to know anything, while Luis decides to go to the facility and see for himself. However, as soon as they leave, Alma makes a call and orders the evacuation of the building. Sometime later, Hugo and Luis arrive at the CIM, where Hugo explains everything he saw. But when they reach the hall where the children were kept, they find the beds empty and no children in sight. Thomas also appears and tries to explain that nothing suspicious is happening and no children are being kidnapped. Panicked, Hugo runs outside, where he finds a truck preparing to take the children away. Unfortunately, he can't find Marta there, as she was put in another truck where a gas is knocking the children unconscious. Meanwhile, Alex wakes up tied to a chair, while Iris and Fernando demand to know how he got the diary. He explains everything that happened in the last few days, including how the nurse lured him and tried to kill him. The two refuse to believe him and are about to shoot when Daniela appears. It turns out that, although she is the minister's daughter, she is also part of the rebel group and helps poor people. She defends Alex and convinces the others that he is not a spy, so he is finally released. Back at Alma's house, she is visited by Jimenez, who promises to help her with the situation. The two are secretly having an affair, and he is fully aware and supportive of her criminal activities. Shortly after, Luis returns home with Hugo, and Alma insists she doesn't know where the children came from. Luis seems to believe her and instructs Jimenez to investigate, emphasizing that the top priority is finding Marta. Later at the station, Jimenez interrogates Dr. Thomas, who quickly surrenders and reveals that Alma has been in charge of the project for 5 years. He even provides all the evidence, confirming the kidnappings and experiments were ordered by her. Elsewhere, Luis gives Julia and Hugo a ride home, where he finds Emilia outside. She invites him for a meal, and he happily accepts. Later, while they talk, he reminisces about the past, revealing he was once in love with her. However, she married someone else, which ended up breaking his heart. These memories upset Luis, so he says he has work and leaves the house. Meanwhile, Julia is approached by an officer who insists she go to the station for a talk. She tries to refuse, but the man says it is non-negotiable, so Hugo offers to go with her as her husband. Later at the station, the officer asks about her sister Julia, who murdered someone, but she pretends not to know anything. She insists her sister couldn't have committed the murder, but the officer knows she is actually Julia and shows her some items that belong to Carlos along with his ashes. This shakes her deeply, but she tries to stay brave and hides her emotions. Elsewhere, Alex is tasked with taking Luis home and also receives a pass to enter Sector 1. There, he notices Daniela and is shocked to realize she is the minister's daughter. She is annoyed to see him and warns him not to reveal anything about her involvement with the rebel group. Alma and her son Ivan arrive at a remote location where they check the children in a truck. They then take an unconscious Marta from the group of children and drive her away. The next morning, Alma takes Marta in her car, where she tells the girl to keep the whole situation a secret, warning that it would only worry her parents if they knew the truth. Meanwhile, Julia and Hugo are still locked in a cell at the station. She is clearly terrified and thinks they are going to kill her, but the officers finally release them both. Later, Julia reaches the roof of a building where she scatters Carlos's alleged ashes and pays her respects. Shortly after, Emilia arrives at the station and tearfully hugs her daughter. It turns out she heard about the murder and encourages Julia to flee the city. Carlos is still being tortured by Jimenez, who says he will spare his mother and Julia if he agrees to work for him. Since he is now considered dead to the world, he can operate as a ghost and work for him discreetly. Meanwhile, at home, Emilia asks Alex once more to go to the Resistance building and seek help to get Julia out of the country. He goes there and asks for help to keep Julia safe, but Iris says she has no space available and tells him to leave. At that moment, Alex forces his way into the apartment, where he notices Daniela is also there along with a sick woman holding a baby to her chest. But when Alex checks, he realizes she is dead, which sends him into a panic. Elsewhere, Alma finally brings Marta home, where the family is relieved and overjoyed to see their daughter. Hugo thanks Alma for everything, while Emilia invites her in for a glass of water. Alma starts asking about her relationship with her husband, but Emilia clarifies they are just good friends. Later, Julia and Hugo take Marta aside and ask where she has been all these days. However, the little girl notices Alma nearby and refuses to reveal anything. Back at the resistance group, the baby starts crying, and they struggle to keep him calm. To make matters worse, several soldiers hear the baby and come to investigate. With no other option, Alex and Daniela quickly leave through the back with him. Meanwhile, the officers approach the apartment and question Iris about any unauthorized persons inside. She points to her father and the dead woman on the bed, claiming they are her sick parents and no one else is present. The soldiers seem to believe it and finally leave her alone. Later, Alma and Luis arrive at the CIM, where they see the dead body of Dr. Thomas hanging. In reality, Jimenez murdered him and staged it to look like he gave up. The officer claims Dr. Thomas was the one who kidnapped the children for experiments and ended up quitting because of it, but Luis doesn't believe it and asks Jimenez to investigate further. Meanwhile, Daniela takes the baby home, where she finds Hugo and Julia and asks them to take care of him. The couple agrees, but soon Luis arrives home and is shocked to see him. He is disappointed that Daniela brought a child from Sector 2, which is against the law, and immediately contacts an orphanage to take the baby away. Even though Daniela tries to protest, her father refuses to listen to her. Meanwhile, at home, Marta sits with Emilia and Alex and tells them what happened at the facility, showing needle marks on her hand. She begs them not to tell her father and reveals how she and a friend snuck out of the facility at night. There, they saw a room with a projector where the doctor and the director referred to Marta as a unique subject. She asks what a unique subject is, but Amelia simply says she is special. At that moment, someone knocks on the door, and it turns out to be Iris who came to get the baby. She claims some people are leaving the country tonight and the baby needs to be on the truck where his father is waiting. However, Amelia refuses to help unless they provide a spot for Julia as well, who needs to escape the city. Iris hesitates at first, but when she realizes there is no other choice, she agrees. Elsewhere, Alma and Jimenez are hooking up in a hotel, and afterwards he hands her the evidence of her crimes given by Dr. Thomas. He tells her to do whatever she wants with it, as the official report will be something else. Meanwhile, Alex uses his pass to enter Sector 1 and soon arrives at the minister's house. He meets with Hugo, Julia, and Daniela and says they need to smuggle the baby at any cost. He explains there is a transport arranged for that night and they even have a spot for Julia. So Hugo, Julia, and Alex successfully take the baby without anyone noticing and manage to escape the mansion. However, upon reaching the checkpoint, Hugo and Julia show their passes, but Alex doesn't have a return pass, so the trio is arrested. To convince the soldiers, Hugo explains they work for the Minister of Health. So, the soldiers immediately call Luis to confirm. Shortly after, he arrives at the checkpoint and, although disappointed, vouches for them. He then gets them out of there and decides to help them with a ride. Sometime later, Hugo and Julia arrive at the meeting point, where the two hug and say goodbye. Before leaving, he hands her a letter from Amelia. Julia then gets into the truck with the baby and reads the letter, which makes her very emotional. Shortly after, a police car stops the truck for an inspection. Unfortunately, it turns out to be a trap, as the soldiers start shooting at the truck to assassinate everyone. After a while, they open the door and find everyone dead inside the truck, except the baby. However, Julia had already left the truck, as reading her mother's letter moved her. She decided that even if she were to die, it would be better to do it by her family's side. Next, Julia returns home with Hugo and tearfully hugs her mother, saying she couldn't leave her alone. Hugo then goes to see Marta, but is surprised to see the door locked. He breaks down the door only to find an armed person who quickly jumps out the window. The family is shaken, unaware that outside the mysterious person is Carlos. The next morning, Julia's family watches the news reporting that the group of people shot the night before were terrorists. They worry about the fate of the poor baby who was in the truck. Hugo, on the other hand, is shaken and decides to take Marta with him to work. Later, Julia is cleaning her room and is shocked to find a key hidden under the bed left by Carlos. It turns out to be the key to his mother's apartment, so Julia wastes no time and goes to visit her. The woman is blind and seems to be in poor condition after her son's alleged death, which worries Julia. Later, Hugo and she go to work with Marta, reminding the little girl to refer to her aunt as Mom. When they arrive at the mansion, they discover Alma has been promoted to Director of Epidemiology, and a big celebration party is being planned for that night. She is delighted to see Marta and takes her to play with Sergio while her parents are tasked with buying groceries. While preparing to go to the store, Julia confesses to Hugo that she visited Carlos's mother after finding a key in Marta's room. Hugo fears it might be a trap by the authorities and asks her not to go back, but she refuses and insists the old woman is alone and needs help. Back at the house, Alex and Amelia are confronted by Iris and her father, who are now furious about the shooting the night before. They believe Alex leaked information about the truck, leading to the military ambush that killed everyone inside. Suspicion also falls on Amelia due to her close friendship with the Minister of Health, who is supposed to be their enemy. Alex insists it was the minister who gave them the ride and knew about the escape plan, but Amelia refuses to believe Luis could have orchestrated something like that. Elsewhere, Hugo and Julia visit Carlos's mother, bringing food and groceries. The old woman explains she often hears people entering her apartment and stealing things, but being blind, she can't stop them. While Julia goes out to buy medicine, Hugo stays in the kitchen to cook soup. Suddenly, a homeless man breaks in and attacks Hugo, demanding all the food. He tries to calm him down, but Carlos appears from behind and subdues the man. He threatens to kill him if he returns. So the homeless man panics and runs away. Hugo is stunned to see that Carlos is still alive, and he asks him not to tell his mother or Julia, as he doesn't want to put them in danger. Hugo realizes it was Carlos who snuck into his house the night before to leave the keys, and he watches his mother from a distance before leaving the building. At the party that night, Alma is very excited about her new position, and is joined by a group of friends. She gives a speech and announces they have come very close to finding a cure for the virus, leading everyone to toast to her. Afterwards, Luis is approached privately by his friend Alvaro, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. He seems worried and warns that a powerful group within the government is planning to eliminate them, but Luis thinks it is a conspiracy theory and asks him to calm down. Alvaro, however, insinuates that Alma might be involved, but Luis gets offended and insists his wife would never do something like that. Before leaving, Alvaro gives an address and asks him to go there if something happens to him. Luis says nothing will go wrong, but Alvaro says goodbye and leaves. After the party ends, Hugo and Julia decide to go home, but as they approach Marta, they realize she has fallen asleep next to Sergio. They try to wake her when Alma enters the room and insists Marta is tired and asks them to let her spend the night. Hugo worries, but when Alma keeps insisting, he leaves his daughter in her care. Sometime later, Hugo takes Julia to an isolated spot, and she wonders why they are there, as it is the place where she had her first kiss with Carlos. Suddenly, he emerges from the shadows, and Julia cries with joy to see him alive. Then, the couple hugs with relief. Meanwhile, at Alma's house, she calls a group of nurses who take blood from Marta and even Sergio. Around midnight, Luis is disturbed to receive news of Alvaro's car accident, in which he passed away. He begins to suspect something is wrong and starts to consider that Alvaro was right about the conspiracy. The next morning, Julia wakes up after spending the night with Carlos, only to realize he is gone. She remembers him saying that would be their last meeting and that he had to leave for her safety. Later, she and Hugo go to the minister's mansion to work, where they find out about Alvaro's death. Luis remembers the address his friend gave him and decides to go there with Hugo. Meanwhile, Julia brings breakfast for Sergio and Marta and suggests they go play in the park. However, the children look pale and prefer to stay home and watch TV, which Julia finds strange. At the same time, Alma shows no concern for Alvaro's death and prepares for her important meeting with the president. Daniela finds it strange that she can dress up and focus on work instead of supporting her husband in a difficult time. But Alma says she doesn't understand how the world works and that everything she is doing is for the good of her children. Sometime later, Luis and Hugo arrive at the address given by Alvaro, where they are shocked to see a pregnant woman. She was Alvaro's mistress, and Luis is stunned his friend kept this secret from him. The woman, Clara, seems terrified because of his death and is convinced he was murdered. At that moment, Luis receives a call from work and has to leave, so he asks Hugo to take care of Clara in his absence. Back at the mansion, Julia approaches the children's room but notices a drop of blood on the floor. At the same time, Hugo discovers Clara bleeding on the floor, which sends him into a panic. It turns out Carlos was watching them from a distance with a rifle and reports everything, as he received orders from Jimenez to kill the woman. But the fact that she is with Hugo complicates things. Meanwhile, he tells Clara she needs to go to a hospital, but she refuses, fearing whoever killed Alvaro will come after her. He decides to take her to Emilia's house to seek help, who examines her and concludes she is fine for now. Clara is still panicked and worries her baby might be seized. She reveals the people who murdered Alvaro have been kidnapping children from the streets to extract their blood, warning that the world will soon run out of children. Elsewhere, Alma arrives to meet the president, where she presents her report, which explains her research to find a cure for the virus. The president seems convinced and signs her proposal. At the same time, Luis is consoling Alvaro's widow at his mansion when he is suddenly approached by Hugo. He explains Clara's sudden bleeding, so Luis immediately runs to Emilia's house to check on her. Meanwhile, neighbor Begonha meets with an assassin and hands over the keys to an apartment. The man goes there where he has a clear view of Emilia's house and prepares to shoot Clara. Shortly after, Luis arrives and tries to calm her down, assuring her no one will harm the baby. Clara says Alvaro was murdered by his own people and encourages Luis to get justice for his friend. She also reminds him he didn't listen to Alvaro's warning the other night. At the same time, Alex is rushing to close all doors and windows when he suddenly spots a sniper in a nearby building. He quickly goes back inside and tells everyone to take cover as the assassin opens fire on the house. Fortunately, no one is hurt, and the shooter ends up retreating after realizing he was exposed. Luis asks Emilia to contact the resistance so they can evacuate Clara from the country. Meanwhile, Julia discovers Marta and Sergio watching a video of children chanting in unison in a remote location. Julia asks what it is, and Sergio explains it is one of his aunt's videos. The video raises Julia's suspicions, and she realizes something is happening at Emilia's house. Iris and her team arrive to take Clara to a safe place. They cover her face and rush her out of the house, while Carlos is positioned nearby, ready to take the shot. However, just as he is about to shoot, Julia arrives, which makes him hesitate. Seizing the moment, the group manages to put Clara in a vehicle and drives her away, while Carlos reports the situation to the other shooters. Shortly after, Hugo's group is stopped by a squad of soldiers demanding they hand over the hooded woman. The group complies, but when the soldiers pull the hood, they are stunned to see it is actually Iris, not Clara. Elsewhere, she is safe inside a car with Luis, who is smuggling her out of the country. On the way, he apologizes to her for having to leave due to corrupt authorities like him, but he guarantees he won't let anything happen to her or the baby, as he owes his life to his best friend, Alvaro. Ending like this, the first 7 episodes of the Barrier sci-fi and drama series from 2020, and I'll see you in the next video. That was Movie Solved. Thanks. Peace out.